G'day gamers, Ranger Tony here with another Pathfinder Kingmaker build video. Today we're going to look at the two-handed weapon ranger. Specifically, this will be a strength ranger build using two-handed weapon combat style, but it would also be suitable for a menacing combat style. I may do another video soon on a variation of this build in which you could do a dex-based two-handed weapon build, so stay tuned for that. But for now, let's look at what races we can pick. Humans, of course, always have an advantage. Their +2 to any one ability score is a good start. The extra feat at first level is great, and their extra skill point is handy. Now, most rangers are not hugely relying on their skills, unlike some classes like rogues, for example, but they get a good selection of skills and some of those are useful, so the extra skill point there helps. Elves as strength-based rangers don't have anything that really stands out, and their -2 to constitution is a bit of a bummer. You could, though, just as easily take the extra points from intelligence and put them into constitution to overcome that, but they're not the best option. Dwarves, with their bonuses to constitution and wisdom, are great for rangers. The constitution gives you, particularly melee rangers, because the constitution gives you that little bit of extra survivability, and wisdom is already a prime stat for a ranger anyway. The -2 to charisma doesn't really hurt all that much. Also, dwarves, with their defensive training against giants and their hatred against orcs and goblinoids, that can pair really well with the favourite enemies of a standard ranger, meaning that if you pick the appropriate favourite enemy types to cover giants, orcs and goblins, you're going to get even more damage when you attack those types of creatures. So dwarves work pretty well. Gnomes and halflings are not the best option because they're small races, so they get deficits to strength. Having said that, they're not terrible either. If you really want to play them, you're just not going to have the strength of the other races. Probably go slightly towards the gnomes because they've got the bonus to constitution, but even halflings with their bonus to dex isn't too bad. Half-elves and half-orcs, again, middle of the road. They've got that +2 to 1 ability score, and they've got half-elves have their adaptability, which allows them to focus on one skill. Half-orcs get an extra skill per level, so that's useful. So any of those make good rangers. Asimir, there's only a couple of heritages that will work okay for this. The Angelkin, with their bonus to strength, is good, but they've also got a bonus to intelligence, which you don't need. Again, you can move that bonus somewhere else. Probably the one that will work a little bit better would be the Lawbringer. They have bonuses to constitution and wisdom, which makes them more like the dwarf, so that might work better as an Asimir. I'm going to stick with human for this build, as I do. Now, ranger archetypes. Which ones are going to suit you as a two-handed melee ranger? Well, pretty much any of them except for Stormwalker, because Stormwalker only gets archery as their combat style. They can't choose any other combat style, so you can't build this as a Stormwalker. The default ranger, they've got everything that you expect. They get their animal companion, they get their favourite enemies. That's going to work well. Freebooter, the only thing I'll say about the freebooter is the freebooter's Bane, using that to pick out a target and give your allies a bonus to hitting that opponent. While that ability works until the opponent is dead, it uses a movement action. So if you use this at the start of combat when the two groups of opponents are a distance apart, you're not going to be able to use this and still attack in the same round because you're not going to be able to get to your opponent. You're going to have sacrificed your movement to to use Freebooter's Bane, and so then next round you're going to be able to move closer and attack. It's the only thing to be aware of. Apart from that, it'll be fine. Flame Warden, the big bonus you're going to get there is you don't get Animal Companion, you've still got favourite enemies, and you get this ability to set your weapon as a magical flaming weapon several times a day. So that's a nice ability there as well. I'm going to stick with the default Ranger. Attributes. So even though they recommend Dexterity and Wisdom, this is a strength-based build. If you have racial bonuses like the human does, put them into Strength. And then you're probably going to want to set your Strength to at least 18. You can go higher if you've got the extra points, but I'm going to put it there for the moment. As with any Ranger build, my personal thought is, do you need Wisdom or not? If you do, then you want to set it to at least 14. That gives you access to all 4 levels of spells. If you set it higher, you will get more spells, and you might even get spells a level earlier. But leaving it at 14 is where I recommend most times. Don't go any lower than that if you want to use the spells. If you don't want to use them, leave it at 10. Charisma and Intelligence are very much dump stats here. You can drop those down to 7 and take the extra points. So you get an extra 8 points for doing that, and you can put them somewhere else. Having said that, you are going to lose 1 skill point by taking out the points for Intelligence. And if you take out the Charisma, you're going to lose out on the Persuasion skill. And I recommend, being that you are the Baron, eventually, of your own country, the ruler of your own country, Persuasion is a nice skill to have. So I recommend actually keeping your Charisma at 10 for that reason. So then you just have to decide how much of the rest of the points that you've got you're going to put into Dexterity and Constitution. I recommend some Dexterity because you are only going to be able to use medium armor, and so you're going to want some Dexterity to offset that to improve your armor class. And you're going to want some Constitution in most cases because you're going to be a frontline fighter. You're a two-handed weapon. You're not going to stand back and strategically only rush in at the right time. You're going to be in there all the time. So some extra hit points will help. So that's the build that I recommend. As I said, there's variations on this, but that's what I recommend to start with. Skills. The main skills that having Wisdom at 14 that you want to look at is Law Nature. This one is really important, I feel, because you want someone hunting when you camp, and that is directly affected by this. If you don't have anyone in your party who has a decent Law Nature skill, you're always going to be struggling, and you're going to have to be bringing along a lot of camping supplies. The other skill that works well with Wisdom is Perception, and that's something that you expect to have as a ranger, but having at least one person in your party with a high perception is good so that they can spot traps and hidden objects and stuff like that. The other skills, I always tend to think Knowledge World is a good one to have, so I put that one in. Knowledge Arcana I tend to leave for arcane spellcasters rather than taking them as a ranger. As I said, I'm going to want Persuasion. I feel I need Persuasion because I don't know why that changed my portrait, but it did. I need Persuasion because I'm the ruler of my country. And then what else can I put the last point in? Well, I've got a bonus to Wisdom, so Religion Law is a good option because that will start at 3. My high dex means I can take any of these here. If you want to play stealth, go for it. You get bonus to that. I tend not to stealth much as a ranger. I can take trickery if I'm not sure that there's going to be anyone else in my party who can open locks and do traps. And then finally, mobility or athletics. I'd probably go for this build athletics because I've got a bit of extra strength. So I'm going to do that. And now we'll have a look at feats. But before we do that, let's talk equipment. So I mentioned before you can only have medium armor. The best armor of the medium armors that you can take will be the breastplate. That's because it has a base armor class of 6 and a maximum of 3 dex bonus that you can add into that, giving you a total of 19. And if you've seen my armor primer video, you'll know that most armors only give you 18 of armor class with the dex bonus. So the breastplate, being as it goes to 19, is the best of the medium armors that you can choose. Later on, once you get into enchanted armors, you may choose to pick something different because you're getting a better bonus from that enchanted armor. But if you can find enchanted breastplates, stick with them, they'll work well. For weapons, there's a lot of options for two-handed weapons, but I tend to really only look at 3. The falchion is essentially a two-handed scimitar. As such, it has a better crit range, so it crits on an 18, a 19, or a 20, so you'll crit more often, but it does less damage than the great sword or the great axe. So you're giving up doing less damage normally to potentially critting more often, so that's a good option if you want to go down the crit route. The complete opposite end of the scale is the great axe, which does crits only on 20, but does 1d12 of damage. That is a good weapon, but because it doesn't crit as often, you know, some people don't particularly like it all that much. I tend to like axes, so sometimes I pick that. Great sword is the good middle of the road. It has a 19 or 20 crit range. It doesn't do as much damage as the great axe when it crits, because the great axe will crit 3 times rather than 2 times the damage. But it's a good middle of the road. As far as availability in the game, I don't see many falchions in the game. Great swords, there are a few from what I've seen, so that might be a fairly good option. Great axes, there's a lot of. Even if you don't get weapon focus immediately in the great axe, because if you get weapon focus from the start, you're going to get that weapon when you start the game. If you don't do that, you'll get access to a great axe in the tutorial mission, and then there is a nice enchanted axe that you get before you get the barony. So all of that works out really, really well. Great swords, there are some enchanted versions around, but I haven't yet seen falchions, so that's just something to be aware of. There's great clubs and there's plenty of other two-handed weapons to use, but most of the other two-handed weapons are like the great axe in that they don't crit as often, and none of them really have any other features that make them stand out to me. There are some exotic weapons as well that you can get access to. The Elven Curved Sword, for example, the Scythe, things like that. Again, they're good weapons, but you've got to expend another feat to get access to those, and so I don't necessarily recommend them in this case. But if you want to build, you know, a scythe-wielding two-handed weapon ranger, do it. It'll work. But you've got to remember you're going to have to spend that extra point to get that weapon proficiency. Okay, so what feats would I recommend? Well, the recommended feat here, ignoring point blank shot, which is obviously a mistake, the recommended feat here of weapon focus, I do recommend taking straight up. So whatever weapon you want to use, that's the one that you pick. That will ensure that you get that weapon when you start the game, which is always handy. From there, you have to take into account what feats you're going to get in your combat style. So as a two-handed weapon combat, you're going to get access to cleave and power attack, which you can take power attack right now. You can't take cleave yet because it's a prerequisite that you have to have power attack. You're going to get intimidating prowess, which demoralizes your opponent, which is another reason not to skimp out on your constitution in this build. You're going to have access later on to cleaving finish and great cleave, and then eventually Dreadful Carnage and Critical Focus. That doesn't mean don't take those on your feats at every odd level, but you got to remember you can get some of those at 2nd level, 6th level, 10th level, 14th level, and 18th level as well. So it's worthwhile planning out what you want to get at what levels. Personally, I would pick Weapon Focus first, and then if you're playing a human, take Power Attack. Now, something to consider, if you're not playing a human and then you get access to your combat style at level 2, don't necessarily think you have to pick Power Attack straight away. You can go and pick Cleave first if you want the Cleave ability, because these allow you to ignore any prerequisites when you use your combat style. So that is useful. As far as other things that you're going to want at higher levels, I tend to like things like Dodge, which improve my armor class, things like Improve Initiative, which improve my chance to start first in combat, then things like Toughness, which improve my hit points. You're then going to also want to consider, once you can get to them at around level 8, the improved critical and all of the other things, because you only get critical focus as a two-handed weapon, so you're going to want improved critical first, which allows you to crit more often, and then from there anything else around criticals, it will be a good and useful skill as well. As I said, this can also be used with the menacing combat style. You get slightly different powers there, so it doesn't focus as much on cleaving. It focuses more on the debuffing abilities like Dazzling Display, Intimidating Prowess, Cornigan Smash, Shatter Defenses, things like that. But they still work very well with two-handed swords. So you can pick either one and that will work really well. So that's my general recommendations for a two-handed weapon ranger build. If you've got your own builds that you've been playing with, please let me know in comments. I hope you like this video. If you do, please like and share it, and I will see you on the next video. Thanks a lot. Bye.